Hi, and welcome to this episode of The Right Stuff. I'm the Queen, Parker J. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, we have with me my returning guest co-host and contributor today, Canadian author Don Cook. He is the author of the series The Last of the Atlanteans. The first book, if you remember, we talked about a year and a half ago, was called Ithyanna, Last Daughter of Atlantis. Now, today, we're going to be continuing the saga Ithyanna and this antediluvian world that is so futuristic, so high tech, and so imaginative that you're going to be like, oh my gosh, what is this series about? Everything, dear listener and dear viewer, everything. And Don is with me again. It was funny because when I contacted Don, I saw that I had been keeping tabs of him because I knew he was working on the second book after we finished talking. And I saw his book. I came out earlier in the summer, I think. Wasn't it summer, Don? It was a summer, right? Yeah, it comes summer, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, you didn't tell me he had finished his book." So I wrote him this big old letter, like, "Please come back." And he's like, "Yeah, sure." Do we finally got a chance to do it now? So I'm really excited to have him on board. Really glad to do what I do. And what I do, dear viewer, is that I showcase Christian authors worldwide. I've been doing this now for the last 12 years. Thank the Lord. It's amazing that the Lord has given me this opportunity to talk to authors all across the globe from all different faith walks and denominations and experiences and levels of creativity, from debut to seasoned New York Times bestselling authors to indie authors. Doesn't matter. We get a chance to showcase them all here, and it's here on The Right Stuff. If you like what we're doing, consider donating to us by going to our patreon.com/right stuff. See what you can do. We are now transitioning everything over to YouTube, so we no longer have Blog Talk, just as a FYI. And so everything's being transitioned over to YouTube. So we have so many shows that we have to upload over there. So I hope you just subscribe today by this channel and enjoy the conversation, because Don has a very fertile imagination. And as we talked about before, where did the idea for this series come from?
Well, where did it come from? Well, it was originally had its very loose beginnings in a short film I made for my advanced filmmaking program at Fanshawe College here in London, Ontario, Canada. That is not in England. But anyway, I made a short film called Ithyanna. Not oh no, actually the Last Atlantis. That was the original, and I took the Ithyanna saga and based it on a few seconds in that short film because my dad wanted me to make that into something much bigger because he saw something bigger and better coming out of this. And anyway, the first book was Ithyanna, Last Daughter of Atlantis, book one, How the World Ended Millennia Ago. And it was set in the days of Noah, just before and up to the flood, and a year after that. And this was and I decided to show the world of Ithyanna and of course Noah as it was, sinful, morally bankrupt, and oddly enough, just as technologically advanced, if not more so. They have where their technology is more advanced than ours, or at least on par with ours. Where they, that DeLorean, that time traveling DeLorean in Back to the Future that got a hover card upgrade. Oh, Ithyanna bombs around her ancient town on a hover bike, and is one of the most aggressive drivers who knows how to bluff her way out of what we would call today a traffic ticket, or what they called in Atlantis a writ of traffic, and using the same techniques that Ben Kenobi used on the stormtroopers in Star Wars. And so I thought, well, why not run with this and make a series of books out of this? And so the first book, without giving away the ending, it's takes place a year after the flood started and just when the waters receded. And I decided to have the world of after the flood being much different geophysically than the world of the first just before it. Much different. One continent, balmy summer conditions all year round, all over the world, an axis with zero tilt, and a water vapor canopy that literally keeps the keeps the warmth in, but keeps the world moist. Although I decided to have the Garden of Eden turned into a steppe-like desert, because when Adam and Eve were driven out, there was no one to tend the garden, and so many of the animals ate each other up or left, and many of the weeds choked out the non-weed life until it was a case of last weed standing, and all that was left was grasses and a dry, arid land. And so I use that as an example of what sin can do to a place. Yeah, and in this one, I decided to pick up, in the second book, I decided to pick up where the first one left off.
Yeah, it's almost a seamless transition from the first book to the second book. And that's what I appreciate about it. That's why I'm going to tell you, dear viewer, to make sure you read these in order, because you'll best appreciate them in order. Now, of course, you can get the second book. It's available now at Amazon.com, where books are sold. You can get that now if you'd like, but you're really going to want to read the first book, because Don does a really good job of depicting this antediluvian world that's highly futuristic. The tech is different. The tech is based off of crystals and gems like that, which, what I found fascinating when I was thinking about it, because I was reviewing some of my thoughts about the book before start on this one. And I like how, nowadays crystals tend to have a more esoteric uh draw to it, the more esoteric, channeling. And I was thinking, like, well, it'd be different if it was more crystallized, where you have the technology is actually based off of crystal balances, frequencies, stuff like that. And so in Ithyanna, Last Daughter of Atlantis, book 2 is Ithyanna versus the slavers of Mortaxian. Mortaxian, right? Mortaxian, or Mortaxian. And so it gets more and more. That's why I said this series about everything. Right. It's like Don took the kitchen sink and just threw everything in the kitchen sink and created this lovely story that has everything you're going to like about sci-fi, historical. I mean, everything. Because this is myth and legend and little things that we don't quite understand. Like one of the things that got me when I saw the cover, I saw Ithyanna fighting, and she's fighting this gray, you know. And I said, the Greys, that's the aliens, right? I just, all these interesting things come to mind, you know what I'm saying, Don? So here we are, second book in the series, and you're really expanding this world, okay? Expanding what's happened after the flood, all this stuff. But before I do that, I always like to get a little bit background. So first book, you get your feedback. Second book, I noticed that you have more reviews on your second book than you did your first one. So what is that like for you to get more people interested in what you're saying? Because now this is your sophomore. This is your sophomore book now.
Yes.
It's not your first written thing completely, but it's sophomore,
Yeah.
So what's it like having that transition from book 1 to book 2? Do you feel more pressure to make sure it's just as invigorating as book 1? Do you feel like, oh my gosh, I have this standard I have to meet? Like, what's going through your mind?
Well, first of all, I decided that when it comes to a formula for what I write, make a formula that you can deviate from, but stick to at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And in this one, Ithyanna book 2 is much different from Ithyanna book 1, because in Ithyanna book 2, it was people from just Ithyanna's time, but in this one, I take it people from practically every era in human history so far. And Ithyanna, of course, she's from one of the much earlier times in Atlantis, but I also include some famous and obscure people. Like, I include Amelia Earhart as my first celebrity guest character. She disappeared, and no one knows where she is. I also decided to have Elvis. People talk about Elvis getting a ride in a UFO. Also thought I'd include Jimmy Hoffa and Howard Hughes, plus some obscure people like a Black Pantheress named Pantera, who literally even the other Black Panthers fear. And also another famous person I include is Captain Mantell, who is known for who flew his Kentucky Air National Guard P-51 while chasing UFO He flew too high and he crashed and allegedly died. Or did he? He did not. Also, that took in Guynemer, the French pilot of World War I who flew into a cloud bank and disappeared. But all these disappearances and others, including that of Ithyanna's aunt, who really didn't like her kid sister, that is Ithy's mother. Literally, I have them all taken to the planet Mortaxian to mine a nefarious substance called Nefarium 666. That's useful in industrial applications, but toxic to humans. And so I decided to have the book be Independence Day as Slave Revolt. And I decided to have as their spiritual leader a character named Brother Jeremiah, and I base him on Martin Luther King Jr. And literally, when I had the first scene with Brother Jeremiah was where he was really grieving for all the rioting that has gone on, and he just wants the world to be at peace. And he was literally crying when in the opening scene where I feature Brother Jeremiah. He's seen it all. The riots in the 50s, the 60s, Watts, Newark, and other places, and it was just breaking his heart like crazy. And then the aliens come along and take him and Pantera, and literally the Pantera and her kid sister Puma, also a Black Panthers, were shooting up cops left, right, and center until the aliens came and actually destroyed some Black Panthers and kidnapped Panthera and Brother Jeremiah. But I have a whole bunch of different kinds of characters in there representing hopefully a good cross-section of humanity.
Well, human nature in general is both simple and complex, right? And sin does these interesting things to us. Sin does interesting things to us. And when you show how sin affects not just us, but the world itself, because we have no idea what perfection looks like. We don't have a clue. If we were to see it, it would be foreign to us. We can't understand a world that is perfect. And I admire authors who try to capture it, but it's extremely difficult because how can imperfect people and imperfect things understand pure perfection? And we've never seen it.
Yes.
We can only see it through the person of Christ, And so with these myriad ideas, you get an idea of what's going on in this book. Now, I told when I met Don, I can't remember how we connect. I don't know if you contacted me or if I saw your book online. I honestly can't.
I think a publicist contacted you.
Okay, yeah, a publicist. As soon as I saw your book, I was all in. I'm like, yes, I love antediluvian fiction. You know what I'm saying? I love it. I love the many, many facets of antediluvian. But this is actually going more from antediluvian to sci-fi. It's actually, you know, stretching away from that. Like the first book I would definitely firmly put in antediluvian, firmly put it there with hints of sci-fi in there. But this one is definitely sci-fi. So dear viewer, if you like your genres mixed up, this is what Don does. He is not standard. He is not going to be your run-of-the-mill sci-fi author, your run-of-the-mill. And so he's got his own ideas. And that's what I love about it. So make sure you pick up Ithyanna, Daughter of Atlantis, book 1 and 2. And book 2 is Ithyanna versus the Slavers of Mortaxian, available both Amazon.com. Now, I want to read a section here, dear listener, because I want you to see what I'm talking about. And what Don does too, and he does in both books, he gives you a lot of vocab, who the characters are, all kind of stuff, and even some notes in there, so just to orient you as the reader know what's going on. Because with this type of world building, sometimes it's for you, Don. You know what I mean? To keep your notes, your sausage check was also for the reader because it's a massive world here. So he has that. And then we're going to go to chapter 2. We're going to go to chapter 2. And chapter 2 is entitled Escape Attempt After Escape Attempt. So Psych Inquisition Examination, a Laboratory Brig, Alien Vessel TXQ 909 BTV Q63, D space point in space time unknown. So you already know we're going for, gang. Here we go. 3 moments after the 3 Greys exited the laboratory brig, Ithyanna mentally deactivated the various devices that kept her imprisoned. Also, aided by her mental powers, she proceeded with utmost stealth out of the lab rig to the spacecraft's landing gear engineering chamber, and, having foiled the prefect and his aides, began carrying out her escape plan. Bridge Conference Chamber, alien vessel TX TQX 909 BTV Q63 D space point in spacetime unknown. We've already learned a great deal about her prefect, the first aide said with clinical emotionlessness. There's no point in keeping her with us. Let's turn her over to the masters. I agree, the prefect stated with factual coldness. We've gleaned all the data and information we can from that Ithyanna woman, far more than we. An odd, quiet, chirping noise of a mechanical nature sounded throughout the ship. Since their ship had very few moving parts, the Greys wondered what could be causing the noise until it stopped, only for the odd chirping noise to start up again a little more shrilly. Must be the left landing gear, prefect, the second aide observed. Request permission to tend to it. Granted, the prefect permitted. Please go ahead. The second aide walked to the sliding door. After it had slid open, the aide left the room. I thought the ship was given a thorough mechanical exam before we left, prefect, a puzzled first aide queried as the door slid shut. It was, the prefect commented. The space flight often sets components awry. Landing gear, engineering chamber, alien vessel, and so forth and so on. The door slid open as a second aide, armed with a tool belt comprised of extremely advanced techno devices, entered the engineering room dedicated to the care and maintenance of both the computerized and mechanical components of the vessel's landing gear. Most of the ship's parts were biocybernetic and simply needed healing when repairs were required. However, there were a few large mechanical components that occasionally required some grunt work repairs, and although the Greys regarded such manual labor as demeaning, they also saw that such work had to be done when necessary. The second aide, believing he had an idea about what work was required, went to work as he walked up to the left gear landing gears, works in the drawer chassis box, and opened it. That's it, the second aide said as he looked into the seemingly worn out hydraulic assembly circuitry, as Ithyanna whip grew her fingernails to dagger length and laid in wait. The aide switched off the rear left gear's hydraulic system, removed and replaced the thick, worn, rod-like part, and, with worn-out component in hand, he told himself, I knew this is what caused all that chirping. Now to take it to the repair chamber. Ithyanna screamed as she grabbed the second aide from behind and pierced both his big black eyes with her steel hardened 10 dagger like fingernails, 5 fingernails per eye. The aide squealed like a pig as his wounds spewed out of his all out his stench filled viscous black bodily fluid like 10 geishers. As his foul smelling fluids oozed out, the second aide deflated until he resembled a gray colored handle sized anthropomorphic hot balloon and died. As she saw the deflated corpse before her, Ithyanna was tempted to vomit from the foul odor of the dead gray's fluids. However, she mentally forced herself from expelling the contents of her own digestive system. As she got a grip of herself, Ithyanna realized she had killed somebody. She then thought of all the spectralists and the crustaceans she had killed back in Atlantis just before the flood hit, and falling to her knees, briefly cried many guilty tears. And that's just an excerpt from Ithyanna, Last Daughter of Atlantis. And this is Ithyanna versus the Slavers of Mortaxian. Again, available on Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. Now you can tell there's a lot going on here in this story. And so I'm excited to share that with you as you get your opportunity to talk about this story. Now, Darren, Ithyanna is dealing with a lot of things right now, from book 1 to book 2. In book 1, she's trying to be the savior of the world. She's kind of knowing what's going on. She's trying to take care of things. Now she's a slave. Now she's caught. Now she's bound by superior powers than hers, if you will. So what's that like for Ithyanna as she transitions from where she was in book 1 to book 2?
Well, what's it like for her? Well, needless to say, it's a humbling experience, and it's also something that literally, it's where the line of Judah, the personification of God in this book, allows for this because he has to have something done about these Mortaxians. And since the Earth people that they abducted cannot return to Earth, they have to come together as one and create a new society once they win. Maybe a spoiler, but still, it's a case of it's about unity, people coming together for the common good for the right reasons. Because there's so much blinking division in our world and divisiveness. And I more or less wanted to create something where everybody came together and fought one common enemy, and once, and so that they would decide to unite to create a better society. Now, I may have like I said, maybe I gave away too many spoilers, but still.
Too many, not too many, because this book is thick, right? And this book is layered. There's a lot of themes going on here. And that's one thing I appreciate about your writing. It's not just um, surface level. There's a lot going on here because you tend to stack your writing and stack things, when you're telling your stories. And that's one thing I appreciate about your writing, that it's not linear, it's multifaceted, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so one thing I appreciate about Ithyanna is that you go past the tech to the heart of things. You go past the motivations to the broken heart. You go past that. But you're gonna have a good ride there, because like I said, Ithyanna, one reason I like that part was because, I got a little bit of horror girl in me, and when she, killed the guy, I'm like, yeah, but at the same time, she's feeling bad, because that's the dichotomy. I took a life, but I had to do what I had to do, and sometimes doing the right thing isn't always easy. Sometimes it's one of the most difficult things to do. And I
Sometimes it's
say,
ugly.
yeah, sometimes doing the right thing is ugly. Sometimes it's not going to feel good. Sometimes doing the right thing is going to make you an enemy of many people because you're doing the right thing. And I say that because so many people in our world are dealing with standing alone, well, seemingly standing alone against a chaotic mob, or they're standing alone against insanity. And they may feel as if I can't do this, but you can. And sometimes doing the right thing is to stand alone, but you're not really alone because the Lord is with you. And those are the things that I think as believers and Christians alike, we need to remember that the Lord is with us, even when we feel alone, even though we're not alone. So Don, you got this book here. You got new characters popping up and everything. So as you as you're building this book, how many books do you think we're going to be in here? Are you thinking
Well,
3? Are you thinking 5?
I think it's going to be quite a few. What I'd like to do is visit different historical periods and also throw in some space opera adventures, and I am working on I've completed the first draft of my next Ithyanna book. And it's set. It's kind of like it's my nod to Star Trek, the classic Star Trek.
Yeah.
And it's also, remember that ever heard that Star Trek episode where the Enterprise was thrown back in time to the late 1960s and they
Yeah.
encounter. Well, I'm doing something along those lines where instead of flying over Omaha, Nebraska, Ithyanna and a much bigger benevolent alien ship flies over the demilitarized zone in Vietnam. And of course, the U.S. Air Force sends up a couple of Phantoms, and the North Vietnamese send up a couple of MiG-21s. And this is kind of like a commentary on the war indirectly, and also to kind of show what happens to the descendants of the people she helps fight. She fights alongside her fellow slaves who fight the battle for freedom, and literally their descendants. And I also include some new, and also I'm using this third book as as kind of a backdoor pilot book for another saga. And it's basically part Star Trek, and very much part Star Trek. In fact, my homage to Star Trek, with a bit of courtship of Eddie's father thrown in for good measures. for good measure, or my three sons with maybe where it's a widowed dad and two two earth two earth sons and one earth daughter, and I pattern one of the earth kids after me. But it's something where I'm expanding into a second franchise, and and for the third book, I'm using an alien spaceship that it's a lot like it's sort of like looks a bit like the XB-70 Valkyrie experimental bomber with a uh, with a goose-like belly underneath, and so I'm using that, and I even have something along the lines of a Klingon type enemy, only this time it's from the Neo-Lemurian Empire.
Indeed.
Neo-Lemurian. And
Mhm.
let's just say the captain the good alien has to confront is so dreadful and so evil and so horrible, even her own government is afraid of her. And she knows how to buy her way out of being discharged. So you could see someone who's that abuses her power and influence to stay on as a captain, and literally that no matter what the medical authorities, no matter what the government, no matter what the brass of this bad girl aliens, what no they try to do, she buys her way out of trouble because she comes from a wealthy old family of. But still, I've been trying to think about how many I would want to do but I do have a planned ending. And this is essentially the wearing down of a sinful soul where she comes to faith in Christ, but one has to read the whole saga to find out what brings her to faith in Christ.
Well, all of our journeys to Christ differ, and some people have to be beat with the hammer a little bit more than a little bit more than others, if you will. But it's amazing how the Lord would take us where we are. And people always say, "Well, I want to wait till I get right before I do this, or wait till I do this," or and you'll never get right. If you wait, you'll never get right. That's why it's the repentant heart crying out. It's the contrite spirit. It's the broken down beaten that comes before the Lord, and that's when he does his best work.
Exactly. And when I tell a tale, I throw practically every influence I've got into my work, and what I like to do, Parker, is I tend to take every influence I got, like Star Trek, The Twilight Zone, and all the others. I disassemble them mentally, put all the parts in a mental warehouse, and when I want to use a trope, I go to the mental warehouse, pick the trope out of the drawer, and put it in the story. Very mechanically minded, but still it works.
That's how you work. And as this
Yeah,
show is always about encouraging different types of author to write the best that they can with what they have, you can't ignore that. Well, Don, I'm looking forward to the third book. I know you say you have it all like drafted out, so that's exciting. So just let me know. I love whoever does your covers. They do a great job on your covers. So
yes.
what's their names and give them a shout out.
Well, her name is Jessica Corbett. That's
Mhm.
that. J.E. Corbett is its. And there are also this time, unlike the first book, there are 5 illustrations in black and
Yeah.
white.
Yeah, the illustrations are cool. They're very cool. Now, did you
Yeah.
have those completed? Did she do those illustrations as well?
She did, and I decided that I want to give this sort of thing life. And the first one, without giving much away, I decided to have the first illustration being of the prologue where she's confronted by the aliens at ray gun point in an ice age North America. And it was apparently that there was an ice age, but it didn't last as long as people thought. That the ice age was covered most of North America after the floodwaters receded. And also, a second one of my favorites, is Ithyanna fleeing Sodom and Gomorrah, which is destroyed in a mushroom cloud type inferno. So
You got a lot of influences here, a lot that's going there. So, dear reader and dear listener and viewer, if you're hearing us, you want to pick up your copy of The Last of the Atlanteans with Ithyanna, and you can follow this saga. There's more to come, and Don has a great way of telling the story. So, if you like your fiction, packed and full of interesting characters, full of interesting side points and plot twists, this is the series for you. So go ahead, pick up your copy today of Ithyanna, Last Daughter of Atlantis, available today, Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. Don, it has been wonderful talking to you today, and I hope we can do it soon again.
I hope so too. I hope I can get the means to get the third book published so I can charge into it and literally give the world more adventures of Ithyanna and also the Corbats, the spin-off franchise. And I am working on the fourth book in the Ithyanna series, but I don't want to tell too much about it because I want to get it historically accurate first, and then get to work on it because it takes place in the U.S. Civil War. Think about the Confederates being like the apes in Planet of the Apes. It's where you have a general, an evil General Lee type who's also a preacher, who literally is abusive and is really the kind of general that fits too many stereotypes. But the fourth one, and I'm just working on it. And literally she has a new enemy called I simply called Lemurian because her name is a serial number. She's from Lemuria, because where the women have numbers and not names. See how totalitarian it is. Think of Paradise Island as an Orwellian dictatorship.
Yeah,
Even Wonder Woman would have a fit.
yeah, yeah. Don't give too much away. Okay, you can hear me. Yeah, don't give too much away, Don, because we want to have you back when you finish that story as well. Because I'm always about following your career, always about following what you're doing, and just as I follow your career, we could have other people who want to write to see. Hey, he had the first time I talked to him, he had one book. Now he has four. And those are the type of stories we like to showcase here on Write Stuff, where we just follow our author's career and from Christian authors all over the world with different messages to things to say. So, Don, thank you, thank you. Thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And dear viewer, go ahead and like and subscribe today. We really want to, increase our membership here. And if you're a Christian author, you like to be interviewed on the show, have me read your book. That's what I do. I do read the books. If I don't read all the book, I do read at least half. At least half the book I try to read, so I at least know what you're talking about. Because I'm an author and I do want to appreciate your work. You know what I'm saying? So if you think this is something you want to do, go ahead and contact me. The information is below. You have a wonderful, absolutely glorious, blessed day. And God bless.